Reading again the sermon by Christopher Love. The title of the sermon is The Zealous Christian Holding Communion with God in Wrestling and Importunate Prayer. The scripture passage is Luke chapter 2, verse 8. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will give unto him as many as he needeth. My text is the conclusion of a familiar parable used by Christ, whereby he instructs his disciples touching the doctrine and use of prayer. The occasion offered to Christ to fall upon this subject is intimated in verse 1 of this chapter. One of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. Whether it was one of the 12 apostles or one of the 70 disciples that propounded the question is not easy to determine, nor is it material to know. Hereupon, Christ gives them a platform or directions for prayer, to direct them about the matters, and withal gives them a parable to inform concerning the manner of praying. For the matter of it, you have it in these words. When you pray, say, Our Father, etc. Not as though it were a command from Jesus Christ that always when we pray we should use that form of speech which is here set down. Jesus Christ indeed intended it for a platform or a pattern to direct us in the making of our prayers. For there is nothing we stand in need of and go to God for, but it is to be found in these words. But he never intended to tie up his people to this form, and that I will prove by 4 reasons. First, because though Luke here saith, when you pray, say, Our Father, etc., yet Matthew varies in his expression and faith, and saith, when you pray, say after this manner, Matthew 6:9, to teach us that we are to stick to the matter contained in this prayer, but we are not confined every time we pray to use the same expressions. By Luke, we learn that the using of this form of words is lawful. By Matthew, that it is not necessary. The second reason is this, because in the recital of the Lord's Prayer by Matthew and Luke, there is much difference. And though the difference be not material, yet it is verbal, which is enough to prove what I intend, to wit, that we are not bound to the words. In the third petition, it is thus in Matthew, Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. In Luke, it is thus, Thy will be done as in heaven, so in earth. In the fourth petition, it is said in Matthew, Give us this day our daily bread. In Luke, it is said, Give us daily, day by day, our daily bread. In the fifth petition, it is said in Matthew, And forgive us our debts. In Luke, it is said, For we forgive everyone that is indebted to us. And lastly, it is said in Matthew, For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. But these words are wholly left out in Luke. Which variance teaches us thus much, that you must not recede from the matter or purport of the words, yet we are not to be superstitious and solicitous about the expressions. As Chemonitis observes, third, another reason to prove that we are not limited to that form is this, because Jesus Christ himself and all his apostles did never use this form in all their prayers. And if there had been a necessity that we should have used it, Christ would, as he might easily have left a command behind him in the Word, and also he would have practiced it himself, that it might have been our example. This reason Chemonitis gives, there are many prayers in David's Psalms, many in the prophets, many in the Acts of the Apostles, many in the epistles of Paul, which are different in expression from this form, and yet doubtless received acceptance from God. The fourth reason, another argument, is this, because it is the work and office of the Spirit of God, not only to help the people of God in the manner how, but also in the matter what to pray, to put even words into our mouths. Romans 8:26, we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit helps our infirmities. And upon these grounds it appears that we are not bound to use that form of words. Ministers do sometimes use this form of prayer to justify the lawfulness of it, and sometimes they do not use it, lest the people should dote too much upon set forms. And so much for the matter of prayer. I come now to the manner, and that is expressed in this parable, which parable is laid down in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th verses. And he said unto them, Which of you shall have a friend, and shall go unto him at midnight, and shall say unto him, Friend, lend me 3 loaves. For a friend of mine in his journey is come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. And he from within shall answer and say, Trouble me not, the door is now shut, and my children are in bed with me. I cannot rise and give thee. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will arise and give him as many as he needeth. Which parable consists of 2 parts. First, a prayer, and second, an answer to it. In the prayer there are 4 parts. First, in the relation of the person praying to him to whom he prays, his friend. Verse 4, Which of you shall have a friend? Whence, observe, God must be a friend to us before any of our prayers be accepted. And second, the time of his address. Verse 5, at midnight. In times of greatest need, of extremest necessity. Isaiah 26:9, With my soul have I desired thee in the night. From whence observe that the chiefest time for God's people to be earnest in prayer to God is a time of trouble. And third, the matter of his request. Lend me 3 loaves, by which some interpreters understand the 3 persons in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Some refer them to the 3 cardinal graces, faith, hope, and charity. But these are vain interpretations. It is observable that in parables some things are used for ornament only, not for the sense. The intent and design of it is this, that we are to order our prayers according to our present necessities. Fourth, there is an occasion of this request. In verse 6, A friend of mine has come to me, and I have nothing, etc. The answer returned to this request is double. First, by way of negation. Verse 7, Trouble me not. Observe that God's people may have denials to their prayers. The reason of this denial is that the door is now shut and my children are with me in bed. There are some times when God's own people may pray to him, yet he shuts his ears to their prayers. God will, as it were, hide himself from the prayers of his own people, that they shall not come at him. Not only the doors are shut, but his children are in bed with him. These children here spoken of are the creatures of God, from whence observe that there may be times when God may take away all his creature comforts from his own people, that they shall not any way be helpful to them. Second, by way of concession, and that is the words of the text, I say unto you, though he will not arise and give him because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will arise and give him as many as he needs. In which words you have first the relation of him that prays to him whom he prays, a friend. Observe, there must be a state of friendship between God and a sinner before his prayers can be heard. Second, the condition upon which the prayer was heard, and that is set down 2 ways. First, negatively, he will hear him not because he is his friend. Second, positively, he will hear him because of his importunity. Observation number 1, that merely a state of friendship and reconciliation with God is not a sufficient ground for us to believe that our prayers shall be heard and accepted by God. Observation 2, there must be an holy importunity, even in God's own friends, in their prayers, to which they expect a gracious return. Third point here is the amplification of the concession. There is more given in the concession than was desired in the supplication. He desired but 3 loaves, and because of his holy importunity, he did rise and give him as many as he needed. Whence observe that where there is an holy importunity in our prayers, God doth in his returns to that soul give more than was desired. The first part of the text was the a relation of the prayer to him to whom he makes his prayer. The observation is this: a man must be brought into a state of friendship or reconciliation with God before any prayer he makes can be accepted. I will prove this doctrine by 3 reasons and then apply it. The reasons are 3. First, God accepteth not the person for the prayer's sake, but the prayer for the person's sake. We read in Genesis 4:4, God hath respect unto Abel and unto his offering, first to Abel, then to his sacrifice. God did accept of his service because his person was in a state of favor with God. God is first pleased with the worker before he can accept the work. This is also laid down in Hebrews 11:5. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. For before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. Now, without faith in Christ to justify thy person, thou canst not please God. Here lies the great difference between the papists and us. The papists say that works justify the person. We say the person justifies the work. For make the tree good, and the fruit must needs be good. And second, because till we be brought into that state of reconciliation, we have no share in the intercession, satisfaction, and righteousness of Jesus Christ. Until we have a share in them, our prayers cannot be accepted. Jacob could not receive the blessing from his father, but in the garments of his elder brother. Nor can we receive anything from the hands of God, but in the robes of Christ. No prayer can be accepted by God, but in and through the intercession of Jesus Christ. If Christ be not an intercessor in heaven, no prayer will be heard on earth. In the 8th chapter of Revelation, verse 3, it is written, there was an angel that came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. The word in the Greek is to this purpose, that he should add it to the prayers of the saints, as if the prayer of Christ and a believer were all one. In the 56th of Isaiah, verse 7, God promised, I will bring my people to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. In the Hebrew it is thus, I will make them joyful in the house of my prayer. Our prayers are but as so many ciphers that signify nothing, till the intercession of Christ is added to them. Without that, it cannot be accepted. And third, because till we are in a state of friendship and reconciliation, we have not the assurance of God's Spirit to help us. And if we have not the assistance of the Spirit, we shall never find acceptance with Him. All requests that are not dictated by the Spirit are but the breathings of the flesh, which God regards not. Now, until we are reconciled to God, we cannot have the Spirit. Galatians 4:6, and because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of His Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So that till you be sons, you cannot have the Spirit. And so much for the reasons. I come now to the application. If this be so, that a man must be in a state of friendship before his prayers can be accepted, hence learn that all that ever thou dost before that estate is odious to God. Not only thy sinful actions, but even thy natural, yea, thy religious actions. Not that they are so in themselves, or in regard of God, but in regard of the doer of it. Psalm 109:7, let his prayer be turned into sin. Thou makest a prayer against sin. God will turn thy prayers into sin. Many prayers cannot turn one sin into a grace, but one sin, when willfully and resolutely continued in, can turn all thy prayers into sin. Proverbs 21:27, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord. How much more when He bringeth it with a wicked mind? A diseased body turns that food into corrupt humours, which an healthful body doth into sound nourishment. I have read of a precious stone that had an excellent virtue in it, but lost all its efficacy if it was put into a dead man's mouth. Prayer is an ordinance of great excellency and of great efficacy, but if it be in a dead man's mouth, if it come out of the heart of one that is dead in trespasses and sins, it loses all its virtue. Water that is pure in the fountain is corrupted in the channel. Second, this doctrine overthrows one main pillar of the Romish religion, justification by works. If God accepteth of the person before he accepts the work, how can any person be justified by works? Unless thy person be justified, unless thou art reconciled, thy works are wicked works. And can wicked works justify? Good works make not a man good, but a good man makes a work good. And shall a work that a man made good return again and make the man good? If we had no other reason against justification by works, saith Perkins, but this, it were sufficient. The third, let this teach you not only to look to the fitness and disposedness of your hearts in prayer, but also to make inquiry what thou art that prayest. It is our duty, and it is a very good work, very good to look to the qualification of the heart in prayer, to look to the qualification of the duty. But the main work is to look after the qualification of the person and to see whether thou art in a state of favor and reconciliation with God, or if the person be not in favor with God, you may be confident the petitions will not be heard nor accepted, but God looks upon it as the corrupt breedings of thy sinful and corrupt heart. You are to look therefore in the performance of duty whether you can go to God in prayer as a father. There are many that look after the qualification of their duty, but few look after the qualification of the person, to see whether they be justified or no, whether God be their friend or not. But we should mainly look to this, for let the heart of man be never so well disposed. Let us suppose it, for indeed no unreconciled men can be well disposed, to speak properly. Yet if thy person be not justified, thy prayer cannot be accepted. God cares not for the rhetoric of prayers, how eloquent they are, nor for the arithmetic of prayers, how many they are, nor for the logic of them, how rational and methodical they are, nor for the music of them, what an harmony and melody of words thou hast. But he looks at the divinity of prayers, which is from the qualification of a person, from a justified person, and in a sanctified manner. It is good to inquire, is my heart right? Is my mind composed? Are my affections raised, kindled in prayer? But chiefly inquire, is my person accepted of God? Let me give a caution here. Take heed you do not mistake this doctrine. Let no man think that because God accepts no prayer, except the person be justified, therefore wicked men are excused from prayer. For though God doth not accept of every man's prayer, yet every man in the world ought to pray. For first, they must pray as creatures that stand in need of their Creator. The ravens cry, and God giveth them meat. Second, the Lord blames wicked men for not praying to Him. Jeremiah 10:25. Pour out thy wrath upon the heathen that know thee not, and upon the families that call not upon thy name. Romans 3:11. There is none that understandeth, there is none that seeketh after God. Third, they are commanded to pray. Acts 8:22 and 23. Peter said to Simon Magus, Repent, therefore, of this thy wickedness, and pray to God, if perhaps the thought of thine heart may be forgiven thee. For I perceive thou art in the gall of bitterness and the bonds of iniquity. Luke chapter 11, verse 8. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. And thus much for the first doctrine and first part of the text, the relation between him that prays and him to whom prayers are made. I come now to the second part, which is the condition upon which the prayer was heard. And that, I told you, was set down two ways. First negatively and second positively. Negatively, not because he is his friend. The observation thence is this, that a state of friendship or reconciliation with God is not sufficient to assure a man that God will give returns to his prayers. Although a man must be brought into a state of friendship and favor with God before his prayers can be heard, yet it is not a sufficient ground for man to believe that God will give him an answer of all his prayers. He will give unto him not because he is his friend. The text says, so that a godly man may make many prayers, and yet God may not give any answer to his prayers. In the handling of this doctrine, I shall do three things. First, I shall show the reasons of the doctrine. Second, I shall show in what cases God may refuse to give his own people the things that they pray for. And third, I shall show how we may know when God denies to hear our prayers, whether the denial be in mercy. The first particular is the reason why God may and doth sometimes deny to hear the prayers of his friends. And that is this, because God hath tied returns of prayer not only to the qualification of the person, but also to the qualification of the duty. That the duty be performed not only by a fit person, but also in a right way, in a right manner, to a right end. God doth not say, let a godly man pray how he will, I will hear his prayers. That were the way to make him to be careless and remiss in the performance of duties. Therefore the Lord expects qualification of the duty as well as of the person. God requires that duties be done with feeling, fervency, faith, fear, and reverence. They must be done in the right manner. There is a fivefold qualification that God requires, even of his friends, as condition of their acceptance. First, the heart must be prepared. Psalm 10:17. Lord, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. Thou wilt prepare their heart. Thou wilt cause thine ear to hear. So Job 11:13, 14, and 15. If thou prepare thine heart and stretch out thine hand towards him, if iniquity be in thine hand, put it far away, and let not wickedness dwell in thy tabernacle. For then shalt thou lift up thy face without spot, yea, thou shalt be steadfast and shalt not fear. This is the first particular. Second, sin must be removed. So you find in the place last quoted, iniquity must be put far away, etc. When God's own people come to worship before God, they must not let any sin lie upon their consciences, unrepented of and indulged. Third, the affections must be raised. David, when he set himself to prayer, he saith, Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Psalm 25:1. You read often in Scripture of lifting up a prayer to God. Isaiah 37:4. It may be the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria hath sent. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. Jeremiah 7:16. Pray not thou for this people, neither lift up cry nor prayer for them. 1 Timothy 2:8. I will that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. Fourth, the mind must be composed in prayer. 1 Corinthians 7:35, we are to attend upon the Lord without distraction. Daniel set his face unto the Lord to seek by prayer and supplications. Daniel 9:3. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, said David. Psalm 5. As an archer, when he shoots an arrow, takes care that his hand shake not, his heart was so fixed on God that he could directly send his prayers unto him. Dost thou think, O man, that God will hear that prayer which thou dost not hear thyself? Will God regard that prayer that thou dost not regard? Will God grant thy request when thou dost not know what thou askest? Because of that indisposedness and distraction that lies upon thy spirit? You must therefore take care, when you take yourselves to prayer, that the devil do not distract and disturb you. Fifth, the desires must be enlarged after God in prayer. Jeremiah 29:13. Then you shall seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. God bids us open our mouths wide, and I will fill them. Psalm 18:10. God hath not promised to fill the heart unless our mouth be opened. Now put all these together. Our prayers will not be heard, except first our hearts be prepared. Second, sin removed. Third, our affections raised. Fourth, our minds composed. And fifth, our desires enlarged. And judge whether this be not ground enough for the doctrine, that a state of friendship is not sufficient for the acceptance of our prayers. I come now to the second thing, and that is a case of conscience. It is this: in what cases may God refuse to give His people the things they pray for? I answer, first, in case you indulge any sin in the heart, Psalm 66:18. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear my prayer. Sin which is in thine heart, by thine indulgence and approbation, doth provoke God, that He will not give an answer to thy prayers. And second, in case thou dost seek for any mercy from God to be fuel for thy sin and lust. James 4:3, ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lusts. So the mother of Zebedee's children in Matthew 20:21, she said to Christ, grant that these my two sons may sit, the one on thy right hand, the other on thy left, in thy kingdom. Now this was an ambitious desire, for she showed that Christ would have reigned upon earth as an earthly king, and she desired that they might be next to him as he sat upon the throne. Therefore Christ said, you know not what you ask. Christ would not give any answer to her request. He would not gratify her pride and ambition. Third, in case God sees we are not able to use the mercy well when we have it. If you would ask gifts from God, it may be God sees that enlarged gifts would make thee proud, and that thou wouldest be puffed up with them, and exalt thyself above thy brethren. Therefore God will deny thee. We read in Genesis 26:1 and 2, when there was a famine in the land, he went to inquire of the Lord whether he should go down into Egypt. God answered, go not down into Egypt. God would not let him go, but in the days of Jacob there was a famine in the land, Genesis 46:3, and God said to Jacob, go down into Egypt. Now what might be the reason that God would have Jacob go down into Egypt and not Isaac? The reason is this: Isaac was a man of weaker graces than Jacob was, and God saw that if Isaac had gone down into Egypt for corn, he would have fallen into the sins of the land. Now Jacob was a strong man in grace and in gifts, for as a prince he wrestled with God and prevailed and was called Israel. God saw that Jacob would resist their idolatrous ways and not be guilty of their sins. So you may ask mercies of God, and it may be you are not able to manage them well, and therefore God denies you, when as another asks the same mercy, and God gives it to him, because he sees he will use it well and improve it to God's glory. Therefore reflect upon thyself, and when God denies thee a mercy which thou hast begged at his hands, say to thyself, this denial is in mercy, for he did not think me fit for it. If men would take this way to consider of God's dealing with them, it would silence all the murmurings and repinings of their hearts against God. Fourth, if you pray but cursorily and carelessly, then God may deny you. He that prays coldly doth, as it were, entreat God to give him a denial. God promises to be found if we seek him with our whole heart. But if we be careless and regardless of ourselves, how can we expect that God should regard us? So much for answer to that question. In what cases God may deny his people's prayers? This is the second thing. The third particular is another case of conscience, and it is this: seeing God doth not hear the prayers of his people in some cases, how may we know whether the denial of our prayers be in mercy or no? God doth not hear the prayers of wicked men. He denies them in wrath, But his people's prayers he denies in mercy. And that is in these cases. First, this is a mercy in case any of his people ask anything that is sinful in itself. God denies that to his people in mercy, which he gives to others in wrath. God will not always give to his people what they pray for, but what is best for them. If God should give his people all they ask, they would be undone. It is mercy to deny a madman a sword, for he would cut his own throat with it. To deny a child a knife, for he would cut his fingers with it. You have an instance in Peter, Luke 5, verse 8. When Simon Peter saw him, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." Had Jesus Christ granted Peter his request, he had been undone forever. Therefore he would not depart from him. So that this denial was in mercy. As on the other side, it is a demonstration of God's wrath many times when God doth grant mercies to wicked men. So it was to Pharaoh. He desired that God would remove the plagues from him. God granted it, thereby to harden Pharaoh's heart and make him ripe for destruction. Second, God denies in mercy. If that we ask would be an occasion of sin. Suppose a man beg wealth. God sees the having of wealth would make him a proud man. Now the denial of that is a mercy to him. As the aforementioned instance, God would not let Isaac go down to Egypt because it would have been an occasion of sin to him. As he said very well, God denies that in love which he grants in anger. God doth not hear many in their desires, that he may hear them for their good. Third, God denies a prayer in mercy when he gives a better in lieu of it. It was the desire of Moses that he might go into the land of Canaan, but it was better to him to go to the heavenly Canaan, and therefore God translated him thither. So the apostles desired Christ to tell them when he would restore the kingdom to Israel. He would not resolve them that, yet he gave them a greater mercy, for he gave them the Holy Ghost. So David desired the life of that child which was illegitimate, but God took away the bastard, which would have been a living monument of David's folly, and gave him a Solomon. God will either give us what we ask, saith Bernard, or what he knows to be better for us. Fourth, God may deny to return his request in mercy, to quicken our hearts and affections in prayer, and to make us more eager in the pursuit after mercy. God many times denies that mercy which thou beggest, not as though he would not hear thee, but to see how thy heart will be drawn out towards him in prayer, to make thee more vehement and importunate in thy desires. Thus God was angry with the prayers of his people in Psalm 80, verse 4, that they might be more fervent. God doth not delay to hear our prayer, saith Ansel, because he hath no mind to give, but that our desires may be kindled, and so he may take occasion to give more plentifully. Fifth, God may deny a thing in mercy if thou didst too eagerly desire the mercy, and too affectionately set thine heart upon it. If thou lovest it too much in the expedition, thou wilt be excessive in the fruition. Rachel had better wanted children, which she so impetuously desired, for she had a child and died in childbed. God turns mercies too passionately desired into curses and snares to us, or else takes them away from us. And so I have answered this second question, and that is the third and last particular. I come now to the application. Use number 1. Consider this, O all you wicked and ungodly men. Consider how far you are from having your prayers heard. What, will not a father hear his child when he prays to him coldly and remissly? And will he hear a slave? If God will not hear the remiss prayer of a godly man, dost thou think he will hear the prayers of a wicked man? If God will not hear his people's prayers at all times, notwithstanding they are in a state of friendship, will God hear thy prayers, O wicked man, that art in a state of enmity against him? If God will not hear the prayers of his own people, which are sometimes his delight, dost thou think he will hear thy prayers, which are always an abomination to him? Second, this should put an holy awe upon the hearts of all godly men. What though you are in a state of favor with God? Though this will carry your souls to heaven, yet this will not bring you a return of your prayers. You must have your hearts rightly qualified before God will give a return of thy prayers. And thus much for the second doctrine and also for the negative condition. I come now to the condition positive, to which returns of prayer are annexed. Though he will not rise and give him because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, he will rise and give him as many as he needs. From which part of the text you may observe this doctrine, that the people of God must not content themselves with being in a state of favor and friendship with God, but they must also labor after this holy importunity in prayer before they can have their prayer accepted. In the handling of this doctrine, I shall proceed in this method. First, I shall answer an objection that stands in the way. Second, I shall show what this importunity is. And third, at what times God works this in His people. Fourth, wherein lies the difference between an holy importunity and a natural importunity. Fifth, what are the reasons why the people of God must have this importunity in prayer? Sixth, how comes it to pass that so many want this holy importunity in their prayers? Seventh, what helps may be used to attain this fervency and importunity of spirit? And then I shall apply it by way of caution. First, I must answer an objection, which is this. Maybe some will say, what need is there that this condition should be so much pressed? What need is there of importunity in prayer? Hath not God decreed what mercy to bestow upon me? If so, then I am sure I shall have those mercies. Let me pray how I will. And on the contrary, if God hath not decreed to give me such a mercy, I shall not have them. Let me pray never so well. The decree of God is effectual, irresistible, and cannot be altered. All mine importunity cannot alter the decree of God. For answer to this, I shall propound three things to your consideration. First, we have not to do to search into the secret will of God. We are to mind the revealed will of God and not the secret. It concerns us not to know what God will do, but what God would have us to do. Deuteronomy 29:29, secret things belong to God, but revealed things to us and to our children. We know not anything of the decree and counsel of God, but only as He is pleased to reveal it. Though God can give a mercy without prayer, yet He hath not anywhere promised to give it without prayer. Prayer is the means that God hath appointed us to use for the obtaining of mercy. Third, the decree of God must not make us to be remiss in prayer. For God hath decreed not only the end, but also the means. As God hath decreed to give thee mercy, so He hath also decreed that thou shouldest pray for it. And therefore, wheresoever the decree or purpose of God is mentioned, it is used as an argument to stir up the people of God to prayer. 2 Samuel 27. Thou, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, hast revealed to thy servant, saying, I will build thee an house. Therefore hath thy servant found in his heart to pray this prayer unto thee. And now, O Lord God, thou art God, that God, and thy words be true, and thou hast promised this goodness unto thy servant. Therefore now, let it please thee to bless the house of thy servant, that it may continue forever before thee. For thou, O Lord, hast spoken it, and with thy blessing let the house of thy servant be blessed forever. You see here, God hath purposed and promised to bless the house of David, and to continue it forever. Does this make David remiss in prayer? Does David argue, what need I pray for this mercy, seeing God has resolved to give it? No. David takes this hint and useth it to good purpose in his prayer. Another instance you have in Isaac. God had decreed and promised that the seed of Abraham should be multiplied as the stars of the heaven, Genesis 15:5, and that this promise should be accomplished in Isaac. Did this make Isaac neglect prayer? No, for we read in Genesis 25:21, Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, etc. Though God had promised that in Isaac all the nations of the earth should be blessed, yet Isaac betakes himself to prayer to God for the accomplishment of that mercy that was decreed and promised. But you will say, suppose God hath decreed he will not give me the mercy I pray for. What benefit is it for me to pray for it? I answer, first, it is more than any man doth know that God hath decreed he will deny the mercy thou askest. And second, if it be so that God hath decreed not to give thee the mercy thou prayest for, yet God will give thee the return of thy prayer unto thy bosom. Though it may be he will not give thee the particular thing thou desirest. Thus I have dispatched the first thing, I have answered the objection. Second particular is this, what is this holy importunity? I answer in general, the word in the original signifies impudence or want of shame. It is a metaphor taken from beggars who are impudently importunate and take no denial. If you deny them once, they will ask you again and again, and never leave till they get what they desire. It is a gathering together of all the affections of the soul, a stirring them all up in prayer, whereby the soul is so earnestly desirous after the good it wants that it will not rest nor leave off the duty until he do find some return. This is meant in Romans 12:12, continuing instant in prayer. The original word is very emphatical. It notes not only to persevere, but to persevere and continue with utmost strength to engage all a man's possibility in the work. It notes instancy and importunity. It is a phrase borrowed from dogs that when they are hunting will not cease following the game until they have got it. So a godly man will pursue God in duty and never leave till he find the mercy he begs from him. Thus did holy Jacob, Genesis 32:26, God said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go unless thou bless me. So it is said of Elias, James 5:17, he prayed earnestly. In the Greek, it is, in praying he prayed. To show that a Christian, when he is praying, should yet pray. Should pray more earnestly. He should be, as it were, in agony in prayer. It was said of Austin in his preaching that he never left preaching till he found he had done some good upon the hearts of his hearers. So must you pray and continue praying, and do not give over till you find some good done upon your hearts, till you find sin weakened and graces strengthened. This is the holy importunity that is here spoken of. And so much for the second particular. Third particular is this, when doth the Lord work in the hearts of his people this holy importunity? What seasons are they wherein the people of God are most importunate? I answer, first, God works this holy importunity in the hearts of his people at their first conversion. Then is the time when they are most earnest after God in duties. Austin tells us it was so in his time. First converts were most fervent and affectionate towards God in duty when they were first brought from the state of nature into the state of grace. At the first taste of the excellency of grace, they are much ravished with it because of the newness of the conditions. New things do most affect men. Second, there is the most holy importunity in a man when he lives under the clearest apprehension and assurance of God's love in Christ. Psalm 42:4, when I remembered these things, I poured out my soul in me. When he remembered and considered the marks and tokens of God's grace in him and love to him, this made him importunate. A Christian may be compared to a marigold, which while the sun shines upon it, opens itself, but afterwards shuts. Christians, when the sun of God's favor shines upon them, their souls are enlarged, their affections inflamed towards God. But when God hides his face, they are troubled, their hearts are straitened, and they cannot pray as they used to do. It is said of the nightingale that when she thinks anyone is near, she sings more sweetly than when she is alone in the wood. The soul, when it sees that God is near it, and that his favor is towards it, then it sings most sweetly, then it prays most fervently. But when the love of God is clouded and the soul left as it were alone, then the affections flag and grow remiss in prayer. Third, another time when the people of God are importunate is when the time for the accomplishment of a promise grows near. This we find in Daniel, when he understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. Then he set his face to seek the Lord by prayer and supplication. Daniel prayed at other times, but then he was most importunate. When the promise was near to the accomplishment, then he was most fervent. To the same purpose as that Jeremiah 29:13, Then shall you call upon me, and ye shall seek for me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your hearts. During the 70 years, the Jews did not express any holy importunity towards God, which is the reason of that expression you read in Daniel 9:13, Though all this evil is come upon us, yet made we not our prayer before the Lord our God, etc. But when the 70 years were come near to an end, the Jews prayed more the last year than they did all the 70 years before. Therefore said God, I know my thoughts that I have towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. Therefore, when you see mercies for a family or a nation wanting, if thine heart be indifferent, that thou dost not care whether thou prayest or not, then you may conclude that mercy will be long before it comes. But if you find that God draws out thine heart for mercy, if God stir up thy desires and work this holy importunity in thine heart, it is an argument that mercy is near. For when prayer is in thine heart, mercy is at the door. Fourth, another time when the people of God are most importunate in prayer is when they are most drawn off from the world, when they are most free from the worldly distractions. The same word in the Hebrew signifies both meditation and prayer, to show that when the heart hath been drawn off from the world by meditation, then it is in a fit posture for prayer. Fifth, another time is when they walk most closely with God. He that lives carelessly will not pray importunately. Therefore Job saith, If iniquity be in thine hands, put it away, so shalt thou lift up thine heart, etc. To note that iniquity entertained and countenanced in the soul is the great hinderer of the lifting up of the heart, the great cooler of importunity. Sixth, another time is in deep and bitter afflictions. Then the people of God are most importunate in their prayers. Psalm 130, verse 1 and 2. Out of the deeps have I cried unto thee, Lord. Hear the voice of my supplication. So Psalm 142, 1 and 2. I cried to the Lord with my voice. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him my trouble. So it is said of the Jews, Psalm 107, 6. They cried unto the Lord in their trouble. And the same words are repeated in verse 13, 19, and 28. When trouble and great distress was upon the Jews by Sennacherib, it is said that for this cause Hezekiah the king and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, prayed and cried to heaven. So it is said of Manasseh, when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly and prayed unto him, etc. So said that good woman, 1 Samuel 1:15, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit, and have poured out my soul before the Lord. Thus it was with the whole church in Isaiah 26:9. With my soul have I desired thee in the night, yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are abroad, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. And that is the last reason wherein the people of God used to be importunate with God in prayer. And so much for the third thing. This is the third in the series of 8 sermons by Christopher Love on Luke 11, verse 8. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. The fourth particular is this, wherein lies the difference betwixt that holy importunity in the hearts of God's people and the seeming importunity which flows from the gifts of nature. Answer, it lies in these 7 things. First, an holy importunity makes a man restless till his prayers be heard. Psalm 143, 6 and 7, I stretch forth mine hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee, as a thirsty land. Hear me speedily, my spirit fails. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like them that go down into the pit. As a thirsty land. A thirsty land is never satisfied till it gets rain. So Psalm 119, verse 20, my soul breaks for the longing it hath. Psalm 42, 1. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. The heart never rests, never gives over running till it come to the water. Such is the importunity of a godly man. He is never quiet, never satisfied till his prayers be returned into his bosom. But it is otherwise with an hypocrite. He prays for mercy, for pardon of sin, but he can rest contented, though God doth not hear him. He can beg grace, but he can be very well satisfied without grace. Proverbs 13:4, the soul of the sluggard desires and hath nothing, but the soul of the diligent maketh fat. Second, an holy importunity is known by this, that it makes a man more earnest for spiritual than temporal mercies. This hath been the temper of God's people. Psalm 4:6, there be many that say, who will show us any good? But Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Observe the difference between David's and wicked men's tempers. Their great question and desire was, who would show them any good, any temporal good? Who would give them the increase of corn and wine? But David's heart breathed after other things, after God's favor and the light of his countenance. So in Psalm 143, 6 to 8, I stretch forth mine hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee. Psalm 63, 1, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee, in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. David was in a wilderness. He wanted water. One would have thought he should have sought God for water, but you see David's desires run in another channel. He thirsted more for God than for water. He more desired spiritual advantages than temporal enjoyments. This importunity makes a man more to endeavor against sin than affliction, more to desire saving grace than common mercies. Now the heart of an hypocrite is more desirous of temporal than spiritual mercies. You read in Hosea 7:14, they have not cried unto me with their heart when they howled upon their beds. They assemble themselves for corn and wine, and they rebel against me. They howled for what? Was it for grace and spiritual blessings? No, it was for corn and wine and oil, not for grace, not for acquaintance with God. Another instance you have in Acts 8, Simon Magus offered money to purchase the Holy Ghost. What was his end in desiring the Holy Ghost? Was it to obtain a spiritual mercy? No, but it was that he might work miracles. And further, when Peter put him upon the begging of a spiritual mercy in verse 22, pray God if perhaps the thoughts of thine heart may be forgiven thee. But Simon Magus followed not Peter's rule. He had no great desire of the pardon of sin or any spiritual mercy. But he prays that none of those things which Peter had spoken might come upon him. In verse 24. That is, that his money might not perish, nor he perish with it. That his gifts might not perish. This was his great request and desire. Third, and holy importunity of God's people is more insensibleness of the inward affections of the heart than in the outward expressions of words. Psalm 38:9, all my desire is before thee, and my groanings are not hid from thee. David's heart panted and failed him, verse 10, but not a word of expressions, though his expressions were very good. Romans 8:26, the Spirit helps our infirmities with sighs and groans that cannot be uttered. It is said in Revelation 5:8, the 24 elders had golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. They are called odors for their sweetness, golden for their excellency, and vials which are vessels of large extent in the belly, but narrow-mouthed. The hearts of God's people are like vials, many times enlarged within, when they are straightened in their words and expressions. There are many times most dilated desires in the hearts of the saints, and yet they are so narrow-mouthed that they are not able to utter. But now it is otherwise with hypocrites. They have more in the expression than in the action. It was God's complaint against the Jews of old. They draw nigh to God with their lips when their hearts were far from Him. An hypocrite indeed performs duties, but his duties never reach to his heart. They are like a pot that is hot at the top but cold at the bottom. Fourth, unholy importunity makes a man more enlarged before God in secret than before men in public. O my dove that art in the cleft of the rock, in the secret places of the stairs, let me see thy countenance, let me hear thy voice, for sweet is thy voice, and thy countenance is comely. The voice of Christ's church is sweet, even then when she is in secret, when none but God beholds her. Canticle 8:13, Thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice. Cause me to hear it. But now an hypocrite doth never care to have any secret communion with God. He cares not to pray alone, and if he be brought to that, he takes no care of his heart. He curbs not his thoughts. All his care is in company, popular applause, and vain glory, as is the wind to the sails of a ship that makes their affections move the faster. An hypocrite in this regard may be resembled to a nightingale which sings sweetest when any man stands near her. So carnal men, when others are witnesses of their actions, then they put forth the utmost of their ability. They are of Jehu's temper. He was zealous only upon that condition that others would see it. Fifth, this holy importunity makes a godly man the more humble, the more enlarged he is to prayer. The reason is because he looks upon his enlargements not as coming from the strength of his natural parts or abilities, but as the free gift and gracious dispensation of God's Spirit. And so he sees he hath nothing whereof to boast, and so it makes him low in his own eyes. You know a violet, that is one of the sweetest flowers, grows lowest in the earth. The fullest ears of corn do most hang down. The fullest barrels make the least noise. So the most gracious heart is the most low and vile in its own apprehension, is the nearest earth, but dust and ashes. The fuller he is of divine discoveries or enlargement, the less boasting doth he make in the world. A ship, the heavier it is laden, the less it is tossed with winds and waves. The more empty it is, the more it is lifted up above the water. So a man, the more empty, the more tossed to and fro with every wind of applause. Grace is, as it were, the ballast of the soul. Keep down a man's spirits and make him humble in the midst of wit and parts. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. Be sober and not puffed up. Do not boast of your enlargements. Though it is true, it doth refer to another thing, yet Byfield refers it to prayer. And he saith, That man that prays to God with most enlargedness of affections towards God, that man cannot, but he must watch and be sober. Sobriety is opposed to pride, for a man may be dumb with his own gifts and graces, and watchfulness is opposed to remissness and deadness and carelessness of spirit in the performance of duties. Thus it is with a sincere man that hath this true importunity in him. But now wicked men, if ever they have enlargements in duty, it puffs them up. It is with them as it was with Uzziah, 2 Chronicles 26:16, when God had helped him marvelously till he was strong. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. When God helps the soul of such a man in duty, it makes him to lift up himself against God and be puffed up above his brethren. Sixth, he that hath this holy importunity in him, his desires are rather quickened than abated by denials. You find this in the woman of Canaan, Matthew 15:22. She cried unto Christ, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. Jesus Christ takes no notice of her. He answered her not a word. Verse 23. There is one discouragement. One would have thought she would have desisted. She prayed again, and the disciples besought him to send her away. Verse 23. There was another discouragement which would have knocked off the desires of many. But she continues her request still. Jesus Christ himself answers her, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Verse 24. There is a third discouragement, and yet this doth not cool her affections, but she comes afresh upon Christ. She came and worshipped, saying, Lord, help me. Verse 25. Yet she found another repulse, and that worse than any of the former. It is not meet to take the children's bread and give it to dogs. Verse 26. Christ, you see, calls her a dog. And yet all this doth not cast her off. But she takes encouragement, even from this discouraging answer. And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Verse 27. She was resolved she would not give over till she got what she came for. Till Christ had said, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee, even as thou wilt. Verse 28. Denials are to the saints as water to the smith's forge. When it is sprinkled upon it, it is so far from cooling or quenching it that it makes it burn with the greatest heat. So the denials and discouragements God's people meet with, they serve for bellows to blow up those sparks that are within them into a flame, to make their desires stronger, their affections to burn the hotter. But now to an hypocrite, denials and discouragements to take off the wheels of his affections and make him to move slowly and heavily. Job 21:15. What is the Almighty that we should serve him, and what profit should we have if we pray unto him? We get no good by it. The mercies we ask are not yet in our hands. Now this argues a sinful impatiency and a want of holy importunity. Seventh, holy importunity is kindled in the heart by the motions and operations of God's blessed Spirit. Galatians 4:6. Because you are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of His Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. In the time of the law, those sacrifices that were accepted were burnt with fire from heaven. Leviticus 9:24, there came fire out from before the Lord and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering. And so in Elijah's time, 1 Kings 18:38, when Elijah had laid his sacrifice upon the altar of the Lord, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood. So the heathens' vestal flames were kindled with sunbeams. The true importunity is from above. It is a fire kindled by God Himself in the hearts of His people. But there is another importunity that comes from natural principles, from natural abilities, a strong memory, a profound judgment, a ready wit, a fluent tongue. And these are very advantageous to the duty. There is a gift of prayer as well as the grace of prayer. Some are importunate in prayer out of fleshly respects. Now this is but a counterfeit importunity. And thus much for the fourth particular, the difference between holy and natural importunity. The text, Luke chapter 11, verse 8 says, I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. The fifth particular is this. What are the reasons why God's people must labor for this holy importunity in their prayers? I answer first, because God hath tied and promised returns, not to the persons praying, but to the qualifications of their prayers. And when the Scripture makes mention of this duty of prayer, it doth also make mention of several concomitants that must go along with it to make it acceptable. To instance, there are divers concomitants which the Scripture holds forth to be necessary for the acceptance of our prayers. First, we must pray believingly. Hebrews 11:6. He that cometh to God must believe. Mark 11:24. Therefore I say unto you, saith Christ, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. He doth not say, pray how you will, and you shall have them, but pray in such and such manner. Pray believingly, and then you shall receive. Very much to this purpose is the first of James, verse 5. If any man want wisdom, let him ask it of God. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. So that you see, God looks to the manner as well as to the matter of a performance. Second, you must pray regularly, according to the will of God. Third, dependingly, resting upon Christ's intercession. Fourth, waitingly. Fifth, preparedly. But these I shall pass by, because they do not so properly concern the point in hand. Sixth, we are commanded to pray earnestly and fervently and importunately. So David did in Psalm 55:17. I will pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. A full place to this purpose is Romans 15:30. Now I beseech you, brethren, for the Lord Jesus Christ's sake, and for the love of the Spirit, that ye strive together with me in your prayers to God for me. The word in the Greek is very emphatical. It is the same word that is applied to Christ when he was in an agony, when he sweat drops of blood. He beseecheth them to contend and strive in their prayers. We are to be, as it were, in agony when we are in prayer. Prayer is not a little book labor. It is not a lip labor only, but it is a raising up and putting forth the heart and affections in the work. So Romans 12:12, be continuing instant in prayer. It is a metaphor taken from dogs. A dog of all creatures is the best able to endure hunger. He will run from place to place and never leave till he hath got his prey. So you are to hunger after God, after mercy, and not to rest satisfied till God doth grant the mercy you stand in need of. Pray, and pray, and pray again, and fight till you overcome. Pray till you get an answer. Another place is James 5:16. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. The word in the original is significant. Some expound it a working prayer. It may be interpreted a prayer well wrought in the heart. And so a prayer that comes from the heart. A prayer wrought in us by the Spirit and carried on by faith. Another place to the same purpose is Acts 26:7. Unto which promise are 12 tribes instantly serving God. The word is rendered by some continually, daily, constantly. But it signifies most properly a serving of God with the utmost of one's strength, to be as a man upon a rack, to use the very all of their power. Or it may be it is borrowed from one that runs a race, wherein men stretch out their limbs to the utmost. The word is the same here that is used in Acts 12:5. Prayer was made without ceasing. Or, as it is in the margin of your book, and more agreeably to the original, instant and earnest prayer was made for Peter. The prayers of God's people were so earnest that they opened the prison doors for him. So Colossians 4:12, Epaphras, who is one of you, a servant of Christ, saluteth you, always laboring fervently for you in prayers. So that you see, it is not every prayer that God is satisfied with. No, nor God's people neither. It is not every prayer that shall prevail with God. There must be importunity in it. So much for the first reason. Second, we must have this holy importunity in prayer because there is much strength in importunity against thee. Whenever thou goest upon thy knees, there is strength against you both from without and from within. First from without. There are the powers of darkness that stand against you and resist you, as it was with Abraham, Genesis 15:11. When Abraham was sacrificing, fowls came down upon the sacrifice, but Abraham drove them away. Diodati saith that this is a sign that the devils, those infernal spirits, labor to disturb us in holy duties. As the good angels behold us in our assemblies and rejoice to see our order, so the wicked angels labor to disturb us and molest us. And second, there is strength against us from within. There is that in thy heart that will carry thee more violently from God than the good motions in thee can bring thee to God. There is a forcible withdrawing of the heart from God. In James 1:14, every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. When you have no will to do good, even then you have a will to do evil. Nay, there are wills of the flesh and lusts of the flesh. Shall we not have half a will for God when we have many wills for sin? You see, therefore, it is not without good reason that we should be thus importunate in prayer, and so much for the fifth particular. The sixth particular is this: what are the reasons why so many people do want this holy importunity, that so many pray and so few pray with that earnestness and eagerness of heart and affection that is required? I answer, that comes to pass for many reasons. First, this comes to pass from the injections and instigations of Satan. The devil acts not only powerfully, but also subtly and craftily. He will endeavor to divert you from the performance of duty. He will persuade you to neglect it if he can. But it may be that thou wilt say, thou wilt direct thy prayer unto God, and thou wilt have thine eye fixed upon God. Why, now Satan will fall in with you. He will jog your arm. He will take off your eye from the mark, that you shall not be able to hit it. Thus he dealt with Abraham, as you heard before. Thus he dealt, Job 1:6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. I am not ignorant that many interpreters by the sons of God do understand the angels, because the angels are called the sons of God, Job 38:7. But it cannot be so taken here. I will give but one reason to prove it, because the place where the angels are is in heaven. And if so, then the devil must be in heaven, which is by all denied. He never was in heaven since he was cast out of it. And therefore Balducius says that this day was the Lord's day. And by the sons of God are meant the godly men that lived in the time and place where Job lived, the posterity of Seth. And you shall find in Scripture this very appellation given to them, Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. These sons of God must needs be men and not angels. And so they are to be understood in this place in Job. The people of God met together and came before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. He came to hinder them and disturb them. So it was in Zechariah 3:1 and 2. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord saith unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a firebrand plucked out of the fire? You see how Satan labored to divert the thoughts and distract the heart of the high priest in the performance of religious duties. That is the first reason. Second, this importunity is wanting in our prayers when we know and allow ourselves in any one sin and let it lie upon our hearts unrepented of. Hildersham gathers from the 51st Psalm that all the while that David did lie in that sin of adultery, all the time that sin was unrepented of, the heart of David was shut up that he could not pray, as he was wont to do before, and as he did after he had repented of that sin, at which time he writ the penitential psalm. You had need look to your hearts, that there do not lie there any sin encouraged and unrepented of. For be sure of this, if thy prayer do not make thee leave sinning. Thy sin will make thee leave praying. That is the second reason of the want of importunity. Third, another reason is this: because many take unfit seasons for the performance of duty. It is the judgment of that learned and reverend man of God, Mr. Bolton, that the taking of unfit seasons for the performance of prayer doth more obstruct and hinder this holy importunity in prayer than all the suggestions and instigations of Satan. Now, there are 3 unfit seasons for the performance of this duty. First, when the body is sleepy and fit for nothing but to take its rest. A sleepy and sluggish temper is a canker to eat out many sweet affections. Canticle 3:1, by night upon my bed I sought him, but I found him not. Some interpreters take occasion hence to speak against late prayers. Second, another unfit season is when the heart is filled with worldly care and distractions and the encumbrances of this present life. Many men are guilty of this. They will so clog themselves with the cares of this life that they cannot have a praying time free from them. Some men will be down on their knees before the things of this world are out of their minds. And so they have no time to consider or meditate or to put the heart into a fit frame for that work. You know we are to attend upon the Lord without distraction, 1 Corinthians 7:35. It was the fault of those Jews in hearing that when they came to hear the word, their hearts did go out after their covetousness, Ezekiel 33:31. That is another season unfit for prayer. Third, another season is when we are under passionate distempers, when tumultuous passions are up, holy affections are down. 1 Timothy 2:8, I will that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting, to show that where there is wrath, the duty of prayer cannot be performed in an acceptable manner. And of the same mind was the Apostle Peter, who therefore gives this counsel, 1 Peter 3:7, likewise ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. The Apostle wisely foresaw that if man and wife lived in discontent and trouble, then their prayers would be hindered. And therefore he adviseth them to prevent the hindrance of their prayers by avoiding occasions of discontent. And that is the third season wherein people are unfit for prayer. So they are diverted from that fervency and importunity they might have in their prayers. We should therefore choose fittest seasons for prayer. It is said of Luther by Vitus Theodorus, who was present with him at the Coburg and many times heard him at his private prayers, in a letter of his to Melanchthon, that there was no day passed over his head wherein Luther did not spend 3 hours at the least in prayers, and those not hours that he could best spare, unseasonable hours, but such hours as were the fittest hours for his study. And that was the reason that Luther was very importunate in his prayers, as the same author informs us. Good God, with how much reverence did I hear him pray, with how much boldness and confidence, etc. And on the contrary, one reason why men have so little of this holy importunity is for want of taking fit seasons for the work. Fourth, another reason of the want of this holy importunity is the disuse and neglect of prayer in your Christian course. Many there are that pray sometimes and leave off praying again. Now this doth very much dull men's affections in prayer. There is a proverb, use makes perfectness. I am sure it is so in the duty of prayer. Let a Christian pray often, and he will come to pray well, and to pray with much enlargedness of heart. And let him leave off prayer, and he will find his heart exceedingly straitened. Take a key. If you use it frequently, it will be bright. But if you lay it aside, it will soon grow rusty. Thus will it be with a man's heart. Use prayer much. Keep it close to the performance of duty. It is the way to have thy heart bright. Let this key of prayer which doth open heaven be used, it will be kept bright. And thy prayer will enter into heaven. But let this key of prayer be laid aside, and do not thou often use it, and will quickly grow rusty again. Thy prayers and performances will not be able to enter heaven, and thou wilt not be able to perform duty in the manner that God expecteth. If thou dost not watch unto prayer with all carefulness, thou wilt loose thy zeal and fervent affection, and thy holy desires after God in duty. As it is with a pump, use it every day and water will come. But if you forbear the use of it 2 or 3 days, water will neither come so easily nor so plentifully. If you do not pump out your holy desires every day, they will quickly flag and grow remiss. Physicians observe concerning the teeth that the side of the teeth that is not used is most subject to rheums and distillations. That heart that is not inured to prayer and holy duties is most subject to Satan's installations and suggestions. This is the 4th reason. The 5th reason why this importunity is wanting is this: because men tie themselves to prescribed forms of prayer. I do not say that it is unlawful to use set forms of prayer. We find that Jesus Christ himself used a form in Matthew 26:39. Christ went and said, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Verse 42, he went again the second time and prayed saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass from me, thy will be done. Verse 44, he went away again and prayed, saying the same words, to show that it is lawful to use set forms of prayer, but not always. You are to strive for the spirit of prayer. A man that will use his crutches constantly shall go lame all the days of his life. You live in an age wherein religion is much professed and the gospel is fully made known. Do not content yourselves with forms. Labor the spirit of prayer. Thereby you may go to God and spread before him your wants and necessities and beg those mercies that are most suitable to your wants and exigencies. Forms indeed will teach you to beg pardon for sin in general, but you must beg pardon for particular sins. You must not only beg mercy in general, but you must also beg those particular mercies that are most suitable to you. And this set forms are defective in, which yet is the main work in prayer. He that ties himself always to another man's form will not be able to pray alone, but weakly and coldly and formally. This is the 5th reason. And 6th, another ground of this importunity is a giving away to an accustomed continuance in a slate and careless performance of duties. This enervates the affections and emasculates the spirits. What men are accustomed to, that they get in habit of, so that they cannot do the contrary. As a carrier's horse that is used to a dull and slow pace cannot go out of it. The lessening of acts makes habits more remiss. That is the last reason, and so much shall suffice for answer to the 6th question. Continuing in the series of sermons by Christopher Love on Luke chapter 11 verse 8, partially as though he will not rise and give him because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will give unto him. The 4th particular is this: by what helps may a man attain to this holy importunity in prayer? For answer, I shall lay down 6 or 7 theological helps by which a man may come to attain this holy importunity. First, possess thine heart with an awful fear of the Almighty God. This was the ground of David's importunity, as you may see in Psalm 5, verse 3. He saith, My voice shalt thou hear in the morning. And in the 7th verse you'll find this holy fear did lie at the bottom. But as for me, I will come into thine house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship towards thine holy temple. David came to duty with a strong impression of God's greatness and dreadfulness. So it is the advice of the apostle that if we would serve God acceptably, we must do it with reverence and godly fear. Hebrews 12:28. That foresighted author, Vitus Theodorus, writes concerning Luther that he prayed with so much confidence as if he had been speaking with his friend and familiar, and yet with so much reverence as one that considered the great distance between God and him. I may allude to that place in Isaiah 60, verse 5, though the words are spoken to another purpose, thy heart shall fear and be enlarged. And holy fear breeds in holy care. If a man once comes to this, that he is fearless of God, he will quickly be careless in prayer. Job 15:4, yea, thou castest off fear and restrainest prayer before God. A man that doth cast off the fear of God doth soon cease to pray unto God. He that fears God most, that man will certainly pray to God best. That is the first help. And second, another help or means to get this holy importunity is this: to recollect thy thoughts by holy meditation before thou comest to this weighty duty of prayer to God. And upon this ground we find meditation and prayer to be put together. Psalm 5, verses 1 and 2, give ear to my words, O Lord, and consider my meditation. Give ear unto my prayer, O God and my King, for unto thee will I pray. David's prayer, you see, is ushered in with meditation. The same word in the Hebrew signifies both to meditate and to pray. You find concerning Isaac, Genesis 24:26, Isaac went out into the fields to meditate. Some read it to pray. Others translate, it is likely he did both. First meditate, then pray. Be much employed in the work of meditation if you would have your hearts much enlarged in prayer. Meditate into whose presence you come, what a glorious God he is, before whom you are to appear. Meditate in whose name you are to come and to pray, by whom you must have access to the throne of grace. Meditate what chief mercies you want and are to beg, what grace you would have strengthened, what lusts you would have quelled, what doubts you would have satisfied, what sins you would have pardoned, in a word, what blessings you would have God to bestow upon you. The meditation of these things must needs give a man more scope and stir up a man's affections in prayer. The third help, if you would get this holy importunity, you must recall your thoughts from worldly and distracting cares when you come to prayer. The apostle therefore doth exhort the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 7 to free themselves from and rid their hands of the cares of the world, and he gives this as a reason that they may attend upon the Lord without distraction. The cares of the world will eat out that good that is in the hearts of men, will rob a man of that freedom and enlargement that otherwise he might have in prayer. Anselm, as he was walking in the fields, saw a shepherd's boy tie a stone to a bird's leg, and as the bird fought to fly up, ever and anon the stone pulled it down again. The spiritual interpretation that he partly made and that we may make is this: when the soul would mount aloft in prayer and grow fervent, the cares of the world pluck it down and cool it. And therefore you must labor to free yourselves from these encumbrances. You must do as Abraham did when he went to sacrifice. He left his servants and cattle at the bottom of the hill. So when you go to offer to God the sacrifices of prayer, you must get above the impediments and distractions of this present life. That is the third help. Another way to get this holy importunity is to watch the heart in prayer. Colossians 4:2. Continue in prayer and watch in the same with thanksgiving. There is a watching to prayer and a watching in praying. A watching to prayer is when a man watcheth his heart and sees that he doth not omit duties, and there is a watching in prayer of which I am now speaking. Now there are 4 enemies that a man must watch against in prayer. First, watch against drowsiness of the body. This is a great impediment of prayer, and we have great need to watch against it. And second, watch against a deadness and dullness of spirit, against a flat and low temper. that is a great hindrance of importunity. Third, watch against satanical suggestions. Satan is always ready to assault thee. He watcheth to disturb and molest you in your prayers. You had need watch to counterwork him. Fourth, you must watch from secular distractions. All these adversaries you must watch against, and that is the way to get this holy importunity into your hearts. The fifth help, if you would get this holy importunity, you must labor to stir up all your affections when you come to pray. Thus you find was the practice of holy David in Psalm 103, verse 1, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, praise his holy name." See how this good man doth muster together all the faculties of his soul, how he calls up all his strength, all that he is or can do, to set forth the name of God. So the Apostle Peter, in his first epistle, chapter 1, verse 13, exhorts those to whom he writes to gird up the loins of their minds. A Christian going towards heaven is compared to a man that is going on a journey. Now a man that is going a journey, he girts up his clothes together about his loins, that nothing may hinder him in his journey. To this the apostle alludes when he bids him gird up their loins. So the like you have in Luke 17:8, "Gird up thyself and serve me." It is an expression of a master to his servant. God is our master. We are his servants. We are to do his work while we be in the world. To that end, let us gird up our loins, let us gather our affections together, that we may be the more fit for and the more vigorous in the work. A distinct and ungirt mind is not fit for prayer. In ancient times, at the first assemblings and church meetings, the deacons cried, "Let us pray, let us attend." There are many that pray and do not attend to prayer. Many pray as if they prayed not. If therefore we would pray indeed, we must attend to it. We must stir up all that is within us to call upon the name of the Lord. Sixth help, if you would get this holy importunity, then you must store your hearts with fullness of matter. And thou goest to prayer. It is emptiness of spirit that causes deadness of heart. Seventh help, if you would get this holy importunity, bemoan the deadness and dullness of thy heart. This was the course that holy David took, Psalm 38:9. "My desires, O Lord, are before thee, and my groaning is not hid from thee." So it was the practice of the church, Isaiah 63:17, "O Lord, why hast thou made us to err from thy ways, and hardened our hearts from thy fear?" So it was the way that Ephraim went in Jeremiah 31:18. "I have heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. Thou chastised me, and I was chastised, as a bullock unaccustomed to the yoke." Verse 19, "Surely after that I was turned, I repented, and after that I was instructed, I smote upon my thigh. I was ashamed, yea, even confounded, because I did bear the reproach of my youth." God doth love to hear his people mourning over and bewailing their wants and weaknesses. And that is one necessary requisite in an acceptable prayer. Bewail therefore thy dullness. Consider that prayer without this holy importunity is like a messenger without legs, as an arrow without feathers, an advocate without a tongue. St. Jerome complained very much of his distractions and dullness in prayer, and chid himself thus, "What doest thou think that Jonah prayed thus when he was in the whale's belly? Or Daniel when he was among the lions? Or the thief when he was upon the cross?" Bemoan your want of importunity if you would get this importunity. And so much shall suffice for the helps or means to get importunity. And so I have dispatched all those particulars propounded in the beginning. I now come to the application of the point. I shall apply it by way of caution to prevent several mistakes in the world about this holy importunity. And there are two sorts of mistakes. There are some that think that they have this importunity when they have it not. And there are others that think they have not this importunity when indeed they have it. Both these mistakes I must labor to rectify. First, there are some that think they have this importunity when they have it not. Every man by nature is proud of his own parts and abilities, and apt to think that he hath more grace than indeed he hath. And here there are 4 mistakes, or if you will, 4 grounds of this great mistake. Many conceit that they have importunity, when indeed they have it not. First, because they are fluent in their expressions in prayer. Second, because they have some stirring of the affections in prayer. Third, because God gives them the mercy they ask. Fourth, because they pray by heart and not by book. Now all these are false grounds, and therefore I shall endeavor to disprove them in order. First ground of this deceit is this: there are some that conceive they have this importunity because they have multitude of words and variety of expressions in prayer. Now this is no just ground for a man to conclude that he hath this holy importunity in 4 cases. First, in case expressions come from the strength of natural gifts and parts, and not from saving grace. A man may have a strong memory or a volubility of tongue and good natural abilities, and yet all this while falls far short of this gracious importunity. And second, in case thou art full in expression but empty in affection. There are many men whose words do outstrip their hearts, and their expressions exceed their affections. So did they in Isaiah 29:13. For as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me. Some men are like boiling water. When it boils fastest and boils out the top, then there is nothing at the bottom. All their prayers are at the top in their mouth, and not in their heart and affections. Their affections do not carry equipage with their words. Third, in case thy importunate expressions be more used in company than in secret, it is a sign thou hast not this holy importunity, that it comes from popular applause. It is not so with the people of God. Christ speaks to his people, Canticle 8:13, Thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice, cause me to bear it. To show that they should not only pray and be importunate when the companions hearken to their voice, when they are in company, but even when no eye sees them, when no ear hears them, when none is present, but God alone. God expects that we should pray in secret as well as in company. And fourth, in case thy fluency of expressions do make thee conceited of thyself and of thy gifts, and to slate the gifts of other men. This is an argument thou hast not this holy importunity, for that makes a man humble and low in his own eyes. When a man comes to despise other men and exalt himself above his brethren, this is a token thy importunity comes not from a right principle. And so I have disproved the first false ground upon which many conceit that they have this importunity. Second false ground. Another false ground upon which men conceive they have this importunity when they have it not is this: because they find in themselves some stirrings in their affections in prayer to God. But this is no just ground for that opinion in these cases. First case, in case thine affections are more stirred up for the removal of affliction upon thee than corruption within thee. As it was with the mariners in Jonah, they cried mightily unto God, but what was it for? Not that they might be delivered from their sins and corruptions, but that God would bring them safe out of that tempest wherein they were. And second, in case thine affections be kindled by a false principle, as by popular applause or vain glory, and not by the Spirit of God. And third, in case thy affections are more drawn out after pardoning mercy than subduing grace. A man whose conscience is awakened may be so far roused with the fears of hell that he may be very earnest to have sin pardoned out of a mere principle of self-love. Fourth, if these stirrings be fading. There are many that have a flushing in their affections, that have no standing affections in their hearts. They are like a man in a fever, that when the distemper is on him, he may be stronger by far than he is in his ordinary course. Now, this is not the natural strength of the man, but only the violence of his distemper and the decay of nature. Just so the violence that some men have doth not argue a strength of grace, but a decrease of grace rather, and so much for the second ground of that mistake. A third ground upon which many mistake is this: because God gives them the mercy they ask. Now, they think God would not give them what they ask if He did not hear and accept their prayers, but neither is this a good ground, and that for these reasons. First, God may give you a mercy, not as a return of prayer, but as a fruit of His general providence, whereby He doth take care for all His creatures. God giveth meat even to the ravens that cry unto Him. The Lord gives to everything their meat in due season. God hears the cries of the meanest of all His creatures in the time of need. Second, God may hear thee and grant thy request in wrath and not in mercy. So it was with the Israelites. They were weary of that government that God had set over them, and they were very importunate to have a king. Nothing would satisfy them but a king. They refused to hear the voice of Samuel and did say, "Nay, but we will have a king." Well, God hears their request and grants it and gives them king. Might they thence conclude, surely their prayers were accepted of God, because God did give them what they desired? No. God tells us quite the contrary in Hosea 13:11, "I gave thee a king in mine anger." So in the 78th Psalm, the Israelites were very desirous of meat. God heard them. In verse 29 to 31, "So they did eat and were filled, for He gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust, but while the meat was in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them and slew the fattest of them and smote down the chosen men of Israel." So that God's giving of a man the mercy he wants is no argument to a man to conclude that God accepts his prayers. And third, if God hath heard thee, it may be it is in temporal favors, but not in spiritual mercies. God gives thee a temporal mercy, but He denies thee spiritual mercies. It may be thou hast begged riches, and God hath granted thee this request to make thee rich in the world. It may be thou hast desired honor, and thou art raised to places of honor. But remember, thou doest beg Christ. Thou dost beg grace and glory. If God doth not give thee these, thou shalt never see the face of God. And consider, what will all these do thee good? They will but feed thee fat for the day of slaughter, and make thee a sweet morsel for worms and devils. Now consider what benefit this will be to thee to have riches, pleasures, and worldly contentments, and they prove a snare to thee. So then it is no just ground for a man to conclude that he hath prayed aright, because God hath answered him. That is the third ground. A fourth ground of men's presumption of the goodness and acceptableness of their prayers is this: they pray by heart and not by book. They use not set forms, they pray extempore. But this also is but a false ground. It appears by these considerations. First, it is possible and usual too for men to pray without book, and yet without heart too. A man may pray a third way. He may pray and yet neither pray with books nor with heart. He may pray by the strength of natural parts, as I told you even now. Second, a man may pray without a form and yet make but a formal prayer. A formal prayer is not to use a form of words. For that Jesus Christ did. He prayed 3 times saying the same words. A man may possibly use a form of words and yet not be formal. And on the other, a man may be formal and yet not use a form of words. That is, he may pray and yet not have his heart and affections wrought upon in that prayer. Prayer is not a work of the memory, invention, or expression, but a work of the heart. Prayer doth not consist in a variety of phrases or change of the method or expression used in prayer, but a work on the affections. God doth not account that to be a prayer that doth not come from the heart and is not accompanied with the heart. And therefore you find this expression concerning the saints' prayers formerly. Hannah poured out her soul before the Lord, and lo, the psalmist, he is said to pour out his heart. And the Israelites are said to pour out their hearts like water before the Lord. So that this proves to be a false bottom, and so much for the first use of caution. The sixth sermon. This may be for caution to the godly to prevent the mistakes of those that have this importunity and think they have it not. Here also they have some seeming reasons. I shall name them, and withal answer them. Their first reason is this: others pray better than I, saith the godly man. Others perform duties with more enlargedness. Now, this reasoning is not good. First, it may be those that thou apprehendest to pray better than thou are of longer standing and larger experience in the ways of God than thou art. God does not expect any more from a man, but according to that measure of grace that he gives the man, and according to his growth and standing in grace. Paul was not at all discouraged because Epaenetus was the first fruits of Achaia unto Christ, Romans 16:5, nor at Andronicus and Junia, that were of note among the apostles and in Christ before him, verse 7. And if Paul was not discouraged, why shouldest thou be discouraged to see other Christians outstrip thee? It may be they are of longer standing than thou. Second, it may be thou dost judge and compare thyself with others at a great disadvantage. As first, it may be thou dost compare thyself and thy praying in secret with the praying of others in public. Now this is very disadvantageous, for in public men have not only inward but also outward encouragements, and so thorough the corruption that is in all our hearts, they are more drawn forth at that time than in secret. And second, it may be thou dost compare their expression with thine affection. It may be there is more in thine affections than all the multitude of their expressions. Thou art not to compare thy affections with the multitude of other men's words. Third, it may be thou dost compare thyself with others when they are at the best and highest, and thou at the worst and lowest. There's a great difference betwixt a man and himself at several times. Now you judge unequally if you compare yourself in that manner. Third, in some cases this may be no discouragement to thee, as first, if thou art weaker in natural gifts, though good affections flow from grace, yet good expressions proceed from the goodness of natural abilities. Second, in case thou art not of as long standing in religion. Third, if thou hast lesser time and opportunities for prayer by reason of necessary cares and encumbering employments. When Jonah was entered into the ship, there was a great storm, insomuch that the ship was ready to sink. Now, all the mariners were at prayer. Every man cried to his God. But Jonah was fast asleep. Now, one would have thought that Jonah had been a most stupid man. But the reason was the greatness of his journey a little before, which caused him to be so heavy to sleep. It may be a man that hath less grace than thou may pray better than thou, because he is not troubled with these worldly encumbrances that thou art necessarily engaged in. And for God doth not distribute gifts and graces to all alike. God hath not appointed that all men should grow in grace alike. To this purpose I may apply Nehemiah 11:17. Mattaniah the son of Micah, the son of Zabdi, the son of Asaph, was the principal to begin the thanksgiving in prayer. And Bakbukiah the second among his brethren, and Abda the son of Shammuz the third. God doth not intend that all should be alike in grace or gifts. God hath his first, second, and third. One may fall short of another, and yet all have the truth of grace. Yea, all have some growth in grace. Another may pray better, and yet thou pray well. Another may pray more affectionately, and yet thou pray as acceptably in the sight of God. So much for answer to the first reason. Second, many a poor soul may say, I can remember since I could pray better and more largely. Now, if I could pray better formerly than now, I am now grown remiss and want this holy importunity. But this is no sound reason, for first it may be thou hadst formerly more affection, but less judgment, less experience, less spiritualness in thy prayers. It may be now thou art more found in knowledge, thou makest a more inward progress in holiness, thou canst now make a more inward prayer to God. Thou hast now more inward communion with God. If this be so, thou hast no cause to be discouraged. God loves a judicious prayer as well as a large and affectionate prayer. You see what you want one way, you make up another way. A young carpenter gives more blows and makes more chips, but an old and experienced workman doth the most and best work. A young musician can play more quickly and nimbly upon an instrument, but an old musician hath more skill. And second, it may be when thou hast more affections in prayer, thou hadst more sin in prayer, more pride in thy gifts, more dependence upon thy duties, more censoriousness of others, and many other corruptions that did accompany thy prayers and thy affectionateness in them. Now, though thou hast less affections, yet those other corruptions are in great part eaten out. And third, it may be thou hast not now so many helps and opportunities to keep up thine heart, to stir up thine affections in prayer as thou hadst formerly. It may be thou didst formerly live under the teachings of an able, godly minister. Now thou hast lost that opportunity. And so there are several other helps that peradventure are now taken away from thee. Fourth, though it is true, thou art abated, and thou didst pray better formerly than now, yet ought not this to be a matter of discouragement to thee. First, if it doth not proceed from a voluntary carelessness. Second, if it be not accompanied with hardness and insensibleness. Third, if it be not continued with laziness and contentedness. And so much for answer to the second reason. Third reason, another ground of doubting to the people of God is this: they complain that they have not those enlarged expressions in prayer which God's people used to have. For answer, consider these things. First, this hath many times been the case of God's own people, that they have wanted expressions. They could not find a vent for their affections. Thus it was with Hannah. She spake in her heart. She was not able to express herself. So it was with holy David. Psalm 77:4, I am so troubled that I cannot speak. And yet, in the first verse of the psalm, he tells us he cried unto the Lord with his voice. Here was a heart full of prayer, though he wanted utterance. And second, it is better to have affections without expressions than expressions without affections. God looks more to the desires of the heart than to the words of the mouth. It may be what thou wantest of expression is made up in affection. Third, it may be what is wanting in words is made up in life. As thou art defective in expression, so thou makest a recompense in conversation. And that is the best expression that can be. It is much better to live a prayer than to express a prayer. It is good to pray for grace, but it is better to live a life of grace. It is good to pray against sin, but it is better to live against sin. And so much for answer to the third doubt. A fourth ground of doubting is this. Many a disconsolate Christian is apt to say, I am troubled with wandering thoughts, with deadness and dullness of heart in prayer. I confess thy case is sad and to be lamented for. And it is just matter of humiliation, yet even here is a matter of comfort. First, if thou dost what thou canst to free thyself from wanderings before thou comest to pray. Second, if thou dost what thou canst to resist these wanderings when you are come before God in prayer. Third, if you be sensible of these wanderings afterward. If you can say, you do these three things, your wanderings shall never be laid to your charge. And thus I have done with both these uses of caution. And so I have done with the principal doctrine, which was this, that in holy importunity, And earnestness of spirit is a condition required in the prayers of God's people if they expect returns thereunto. There is another considerable doctrine yet behind, taken from the amplification of the concession. He asked but 3 loaves, but because of his importunity, he gave him as many as he needed. The observation thence is this, that when the heart is importunate in begging mercy, God usually gives us more than we pray for. In the handling of this doctrine, I shall first prove it by Scripture instances, and second, I shall lay down the reasons of it, and third, I shall answer some objections and cases of conscience, and so I shall come to application. First, I shall prove it by Scripture instances. You have the instance of Hannah in 1 Samuel 1. She begged a son, which with much importunity, being a woman of sorrowful spirit, for want of a son. Well, God returns her an answer. Sheminitis observes that Hannah asked a son, and God gave her a prophet. She begged a son, and God gave her a gracious son, a son greatly beloved of God. She asked a single mercy, and God gave her a double blessing. Another instance you have in Abraham, Genesis 17. Abraham prayed, "Oh, that Ishmael might live in thy sight." Well, what answer doth God return? That you have in verse 19. "Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him." It was Abraham's desire that Ishmael might live. Now God not only grants that, but he grants him a better mercy. Another instance you have in the Canaanitish woman, Matthew 15, who did importunately beg of Christ the life and health of her daughter. Christ answered her thus, "Be it unto thee even as thou wilt." Now if you ask, what is the reason why God deals thus with his people? I answer this first, this proceeds from the largeness and greatness of God's power, and the riches and the freeness of his grace towards us. Ephesians 3:20, "Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we are able to ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." A man may ask of another man, and it may be received, but then he must not ask again. But herein appears the power and ability, the goodness and bounty of God. If we ask of him once or twice, he is a God that is able to give, not according to our asking only, but above what we ask. And not only above what we can ask, but above what we can ask or think. The words are so full that they cannot be well expressed. God doth more than excessively. God hath not only a fullness of abundance, but of redundancy, not only of plenty, but bounty. He is better than our prayers. Second, God will do this, to relieve his people and to supply their spiritual wants. Among the wants of God's people, this is one, that we do not know what we need, nor what we should pray for as we ought. Romans 8:26. Therefore God supplies our wants not only in what we ask, but in what we want, though we do not ask it, nor pray for it. So much for the reasons. I come now to answer some objections. But some may say, what privilege hath a godly man more than a wicked man, to have more to be given to him than he doth ask? Seeing we read of wicked men that they do prosper in the world and have more than their heart can wish. Psalm 73. I answer, first, it is true, in temporal mercies, God may give wicked men more than the godly, and more than their heart can wish. But God doth not give them spiritual mercies. As we may see in Balaam, God gave Balaam honors and riches. But Balaam cried out, "Oh, that I might die the death of the righteous." This God did not grant him. So many wicked men do say in a general way, "Lord, pardon my sins." God doth not hear them. It may be a child of God may ask of God temporal mercies, and God will give him spiritual mercies. This is more than he did ask, and that much better than he gives to wicked men. Though God doth give unto wicked men more than their hearts can wish, yet God doth not give it as any return of prayer. but only as fruits of general and common providence, as they are his creatures whom he will preserve. Third, God may give wicked men more than their hearts can wish, and this is not in mercy, but in wrath. They may receive mercies, but not as mercies, not in mercy. And there are 4 demonstrations when God hears a man in wrath. First, when he asks anything of God that is sinful in its own nature, as the denial of it is an act of mercy, so the grant of it is a fruit of God's anger. God doth many times give those things in his anger which he denies when he is well pleased. God will not hear his own people according to their wills, but according to his own will. It is in this case, as it is with a father, when his child, for want of knowledge, asks a knife of him by which he may cut his fingers. The father will not give him the knife, except it be in wrath. So a man may ask mercies at the hand of God, and it may be God will give them in wrath to cut themselves with them. And second, if you ask those things of God which, though they are not sinful in their own nature, yet if thy asking of these lawful things be to an unlawful end, God will deny these in mercy. And when he gives them, it is in wrath. As if thou desirest temporal mercies to abuse them to drunkenness or to live in any other sin and wickedness. If God give thee those mercies, 'tis as a testimony of his wrath to thee. So it was in the 78th Psalm, verse 18. They tempted God in their hearts and asked meat for their lust. There was the end of their desires. They desired a lawful thing for unlawful ends. But what followed? The wrath of God. For while the meat was in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them. Verse 30 and 31. Third, if you ask anything of God and he gives it in wrath, you may know by this, if it be an occasion of sin to thee, it is given thee in wrath. So it was with the Israelites, even now mentioned. The meat that God gave them proved an occasion of sin. Verse 32, they sinned still and believed not his wondrous works. When the mercies you enjoy becomes fuel to your lusts, those mercies are accompanied with the curse and wrath of God. And this using of mercies will turn to the aggravation of wrath. Fourth, mercies are given thee in wrath when the enjoyment of them hinders thee from the receipt of greater mercies from God. Thus it is with the devils. Matthew 8:31 and 32. They besought Christ that they might go into the herd of swine. Christ granted them that. He let them enter into swine, that they might not enter into men. When the giving of temporal mercies hinders thee from the receipt of spiritual mercies, they are given in wrath. There are many men to whom God gives temporal mercies. They have riches in abundance, pleasure at will, everything they can desire. But these mercies take off their thoughts and affections from better things. By getting these, they lose Christ and grace, immortality, and eternal happiness. Now, in these cases, though God doth give mercies, yet they are given in wrath. And so, notwithstanding this objection, the privilege of God's people is much greater than the privilege of wicked men. But it may be further objected and inquired, if this be so, that mercies are given to wicked men in wrath, and by a common providence, how may I know when mercies come to me as returns of prayer? Now I shall answer that in these particulars. First, mercies are returns of prayer when the receiving of mercy is a means to quicken the heart to beg for other mercies at the hands of God. When the mercy shall make thee more to love prayer, more to use prayer, this you find proved by David's experience in Psalm 116:2. Because he hath heard my voice, therefore will I call upon him as long as I live. You see here, because God had heard David's prayer and had given him the mercy he begged, he makes an argument and an engagement to himself to pray as long as he lived. So that to continue prayer is a means to get more mercy. And the leaving off of prayer, when you have a mercy, is a means to lose that which you have obtained at the hands of God. But as for the wicked, it is not so with them. Mercies received only from a common or general providence have no such efficacy as you may see in Job 21, 7 and 8. There Job tells you, the wicked live, become old, yea, mighty in power. Their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull gendereth and faileth not. Their cow calveth and casteth not her calf. And so he goes on describing that happy condition that wicked men were in, and how God followed them with mercy after mercy. Well, what was the effect of this? Did this engage them to call upon God? Did this make them in love with prayer? No, it had quite a contrary effect. Verse 14, therefore say they unto God, depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways. And in verse 15, what is the Almighty that we should serve him, and what profit should we have if we pray unto him? Second, mercies that are given as returns of prayer do not only make a man consider that they are from God, but draws the heart to God and put a man upon employing them in his service and to the honor of God. Thus we find to be the temper of Hannah. 1 Samuel 1, 27 and 28. Hannah had prayed for a child. God gave her a son. Now what doth she with this mercy? Observe, for this child I prayed, and the Lord hath granted my petition. Therefore have I lent him to the Lord as long as he liveth. Seeing God hath heard my prayer and granted my request, therefore will I give this mercy to God, to be employed in his service. So 1 John 3:22, and whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, because we keep his commandments, and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. You see, it is made an evidence that what we receive is received as an answer to our askings, because we make those mercies helps to obedience, to keep God's commandments. But now, mercies that come from a common providence do not draw out the heart towards God. They rather draw them out towards sin, as it was in the aforementioned Israelites in Psalm 78. Though God did give them their heart's desire, yet were they not estranged from their lust. Third, mercies come from God as returns of prayer, where they make you more to rejoice in the God that hears your prayers and gives you the mercy than in the mercy you receive from God. Thus you find it was in Hannah, she asked a son, and God gave her a son. Yet she saith, 1 Samuel 2:1, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord. God gave her a son. She rejoiced in that mercy, but she rejoiced more in the God that gave it. So it was with David in Psalm 85:6, wilt thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? We will not rejoice chiefly in the mercy, but in thee. But on the contrary, those that receive mercies out of the basket of common providence, they rejoice more in the mercy than in the God of mercy. They rejoice in their wealth and glory, in the multitude of their riches. But as for God, they bid him depart from them. They cannot rejoice in God. The seventh sermon, mercies that are the fruits of prayer, are known by this: he that hath them ascribes them not to his own industry, but to the grace and mercy of God. Thus it was with Samson, Judges 15, when he was ready to die for thirst, he prayed unto the Lord, and God clave an hollow place in the jawbone, and gave him water. Now Samson calls the name of the place En-Hakkore, the well of him that prayed. He ascribes it to the return of his prayers, that assistance that God gave him to pray. So Hannah ascribed her mercy to God, not to herself. But now, a wicked man that receives mercies from God's general providence, his language is, this I have labored for. This I have ventured my life for. This my friends left me. This I got by my forecast, providence, and industry. Thus they sacrifice to their own nets, but seldom say, this is the return of prayers. This is the gift of God. Fifth, that mercy that is given as a return of prayer, is enjoyed with more inward quiet and contentment of mind than when it is given by general providence. When Eli told Hannah that she would have a son and that her prayer was heard, she had so much inward joy and contentment of mind that it said Hannah went away rejoicing, and her countenance was no more sad. The consideration of that made her very much to rejoice. The reason is because mercies that are given in as returns of prayer, they are given in with a blessing and inward quietness and contentment of mind. The mercies that God gives His own people, He gives them with joy and comfort. Proverbs 10:22. The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and He addeth no sorrow to it. You read 1 Chronicles 4:10, and Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, O that thou wouldest bless me indeed, and enlarge my coasts, and that thy hand might be with me, and that thou wouldest keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. Jabez knew that it was the manner of God when He gave blessings as returns of prayer, not to add grief to it. Isaac, he prayed for his wife, and God gave her to him to be a great comfort to him. It may be wicked men have wives and no content with them, but sorrow added to them because they did not pray for them as Isaac did. They have children, but sorrow with them, and abundance of riches and sorrow added to that. And all because they have not the mercies as returns of prayer. The mercies that are given in a way of general providence usually are accompanied with vexatiousness and discontent, snares and sorrows mingled with the mercies. So it was in Psalm 106:15, He gave them their requests, but He sent leanness into their souls. God gives wicked men indeed their requests, but how is it with a blessing and with content? No such matter. They have a curse with it. You know Saul gave Michal to David to be a snare to him, a cross and discontentment. So doth God many times in just judgment give His blessings to wicked men to be snares and curses and crosses to them. And sixth, mercies that come as returns of prayer may be known by this, if they are given in the time when God doth draw out thine heart to seek Him in holy duties. An instance of this you have in Acts 12. While the church was met to pray for Peter's enlargement, the prison doors were opened, and he came and knocked at the door of the house where they were assembled. This was an evident sign that God gave in Peter to them as a return of prayer. So Acts 4:31, when they had prayed, the place was shaken where they were assembled together, and they were all filled with the Holy Ghost. You read in John 4:52 and 53 that the nobleman inquired diligently concerning the time wherein the child began to recover. And when he understood that, he knew that it was a return of his prayer and a fruit of Christ's love. God tells His people in Isaiah 65:24, before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Thus we read in the book of Martyrs that the people of God did make it a sign of God's answering our prayers when God was pleased to give in mercies to them at the time wherein they prayed. Thus we read of Luther that there was a young man that had made a covenant and sealed a bond with his own blood to give himself soul and body to the devil, only to live in pleasure and to do and to have whatsoever he did desire. And when the time of the bond was almost out, he, being much troubled in his mind, came to Luther and told him what he had done, and what was like to befall him upon it. Whereupon Luther called the church together and kept a solemn fast in the behalf of the young man. And whilst that Luther was in prayer, being earnest with God, there was a great noise heard among them, and the bond was cast into the lap of Luther in the midst of the congregation. And so for a time to come, the young man did lead a holy and godly life. Seventh and lastly, mercies are given as answers of prayer. Prayers in case you make care and conscience to perform to God those vows which you made to God before you did enjoy the mercy. But when we promise God largely before we have the mercy, and when we have them, do not perform our vows, It is an argument that we have the mercies by a general and common providence. Job 22:27 and 28, Thou shalt make thy prayer unto him, and he shall hear thee, and thou shalt pay thy vows, thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, and the light shall shine upon thy ways. When thou beggest a mercy, and sayest, Lord, give me such a mercy, and I will do thus and thus, I will walk so and so before thee, I will improve them to thy glory. Now when thou thus ask for mercy, and make vows to God, he will hear. But then thou must be sure to perform thy vows. This frame of heart we find to be in David in Psalm 66:13 and 14. I will go into thine house with burnt offering. I will pay thee my vows, which my lips have uttered, and my mouth hath spoken when I was in trouble. You say David was in trouble, and he prayed to God and made some promises and vows in case God would deliver him. Now God did deliver him out of trouble, and he did make good his vows. Now here was a return of prayer. David, you see, did not grow secure and careless, but he made conscience to pay what he had promised to God. And so you see how you may discover whether the mercies you receive from God be returns of prayer or only fruits of common and general providence. And so much for answer to that question. Another objection or case of conscience is this: how can this be true that God gives his people more than they need, seeing it is the complaint of God's people many times that they have been a long time begging mercy, and God doth not give them so much as they desire? Many say, I pray for pardon of sin, and cannot get it pardoned, and the pardon sealed. I pray daily for power against my corruptions, and yet I cannot get my lusts subdued. What then shall I think of my prayers? May some poor soul say. Now to this I shall lay down several things by way of an answer. First, it must be considered that God many times gets glory by the denials of his people. Yea, he gets more glory by denying than by granting of a mercy. And if the denying of a mercy to thee be the way to advance God's glory, it is better that God should have his glory, and thou be without the mercy, than that thou shouldst have the mercy and God want his glory. An eminent instance of this you have in John 11. There was a prayer made by Mary and Martha for their brother Lazarus. And they came unto Jesus and said, He whom thou lovest is sick. But Jesus said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. When Jesus Christ heard that he was sick, yet he stayed 2 days in the place where he was. Though he loved Martha and he loved Lazarus, yet he stayed 2 days and would not go to him. But in the 14th verse, Christ said plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sake that I was not there, to the intent that you might believe. But they said unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, he had not died. Christ came and commanded them to roll the stone away. Martha answered, He hath been 4 days in the grave, and by this time he stinketh. This was that Christ aimed at. Christ knew that it was greater glory to him to raise the dead out of the grave than to raise him out of the bed of sickness. The power of his Godhead did more appear in the former than in the latter. And when Martha told him he stinketh, Jesus answered, Said I not unto thee, if thou didst believe, thou shouldst see the glory of God? That is, thou shouldst see the power of my Godhead. This was the end of Christ's denying of mercy, though it was earnestly desired. Second, I answer, it may be thou dost not hear God in his commands, and then it is no wonder that God doth not hear thee in thy prayers. If thou dost not hearken to the call of God, it may be expected that God should not hearken to thy call. See Proverbs 1:24. Because I have called and ye refused, I have stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. Compared with verse 28, Then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they shall not find me. Micah 3, verse 4. Then shall they cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doings. Zechariah 7:13, therefore it is come to pass that as he cried, and they would not hear, so they cried, and I would not hear, saith the Lord of hosts. It may be God hath been calling upon thee this many years to believe and to repent, to be reformed, to forsake the evil of your doings, and thou hast not heard his calling. His mercies have not drawn thee. His judgments have not affrighted thee. And is it not just with God to let thee call, and he not hear thee? Third, it may be thou dost ask but slightly, and therefore thy prayers are not successful, as it is with a man that asketh anything of another man slightedly and coldly. He doth, as it were, desire him to say him nay. So when man asks mercies of God carelessly and indifferently, this provokes God to give no answer. It may be thou prayest sleepily and drowsily, and with a wandering heart. And dost thou think God will hear that prayer, that thou dost not hear thyself? Dost thou think that God will accept of that prayer when thou knowest not what thou sayest? Fourth, God may give thee a mercy, and thou, through thy incredulity, impatiency, and inobservancy, not mind the returns that God gives. God may hear thy prayers, and yet thou not take any notice of it. This you may see in Job 9:16 and 17. If I have called, and God answered, yet I will not believe that God hath heard me, because thou breakest me with thy tempest. Job was in a fit of impatiency and unbelief, and though God did give him returns of prayer, yet he would not and did not observe them. Fifth, God may deny thee the mercy, not that he is unable or unwilling to hear thee or relieve thee, but to make thee the more desirous of, and so the more fit for mercy. It may be yet thou art not fit for an answer. The philosopher begged some money of Antigonus. He gave him a drachma. He said, it is not for a king to give so little. A talent had been a more suitable gift. The king replied, though a talent is fit for me to give, yet thou art not fit to receive. So though God is always fit and ready to give an answer to our prayers, yet we are not always fit and ready to receive it. God bids us open our mouths wide, and I will fill it. God denies us that we may open our mouths the wider, and enlarge our desires the more after mercy. The Lord doth by his people, as a father by his child. A father may seem to withdraw and hide himself from his child, to try its love to him. And the child begins to mourn and cry, yet the father comes not to the child. But when he hears the child cry aloud, then he comes to it and takes it up in his arms. So the Lord many times sees his people pray, but he seems to withdraw from them, to hide himself from the prayers of his people, and goes, as it were, out of their sight until they begin to cry aloud, to be very earnest and importunate in their prayers, till their desires be enlarged towards God. And then God graciously returns their prayers into their bosom. Now, this is a very good reason why God denies the prayers of his people. Desires deferred grow the stronger. But if the mercies be soon given, the desires grow cold, and the mercy grows contemptible. Manna lightly come is lightly set by. God doth by us, as a fisherman doth. He draws back the bait so that the fish may come after it the more eagerly, and bite the harder. God seems to draw back a mercy that we may more earnestly pursue it. Sixth, consider this, that God's people have prayed and waited a long time before God hath given them the mercy they have asked, before God hath given them an answer of their prayers. God promised Abraham a son, that from him should proceed such an one in whom all the families of the earth should be blessed, that his seed should be multiplied as the stars in the firmament. And yet it was 15 years between the time of God's making him that promise and the accomplishment of it. So likewise you find it in Zechariah and Elizabeth, They prayed for a child at the first beginning of their marriage. Now God did hear their cries and prayers, yet he did not give them a return until they were old and stricken in years. So likewise it was with the church. Lamentations 3 verse 8, also when I cry and shout, he shutteth out my prayer. And verse 44, thou hast covered thyself with a cloud, that our prayers should not pass through. So also it was, Habakkuk 1:2, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? It was also the complaint of holy David, Psalm 22:1 and 2. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my roaring? O my God, I cry in the daytime, and thou hearest not, and in the night season, and am not silent. Seventh, God may not only defer or deny to hear his people's prayers, but in some times and cases be angry with the prayers of his people. Psalm 80 verse 4, O Lord God of hosts, how long wilt thou be angry against the prayers of thy people? Job 30 verse 20 and 21, I cry unto thee, and thou dost not hear me. I stand up, and thou regardest me not. Thou art become cruel to me with thy strong hand. Thou opposest thyself against me. 8, consider this for thy comfort, that thy person may be accepted, and thy prayers heard, and yet the thing that thou prayest for not granted to thee. An instance of this you have in Christ himself. He prayed, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Matthew 26. Yet this cup did not pass from him, but he did drink of it, and yet it is said that Christ was heard in all that he prayed for. Hebrews 5:7. Deuteronomy 3 verse 23, I besought the Lord that at that time, saith Moses, and verse 26, but the Lord was wroth with me for your sakes, and would not hear me. And the Lord said unto me, let it suffice thee, speak no more to me of this matter. Moses did importunately desire that he might see the land and go over Jordan to possess it. Moses was a godly man, and here he prays for this mercy. Yet God was angry with him and bade him pray no more. God bade him go up to the mount and see the land, but told him he should not go over. So when thou askest a particular mercy at the hand of God, God may deny them that mercy, and yet hear their prayers and accept their persons. 9th, God may deny thee the mercy thou askest, and give thee a better in the room of it. He makes you to open your mouths the wider, that he may give you the greater mercies. Abraham prayed that Ishmael might live. Now God did not hear his prayer in that as Abraham did desire it, but he gave him Isaac, and with him he established the covenant, which was a better mercy. Moses was denied in his request to go into Canaan, but he was translated into a better place, into the true Canaan, the kingdom of heaven. And 10th, God may deny what we pray for in mercy, which should he grant it, would be a token of his wrath, as if a man should ask that which was sinful, or that which would be an unavoidable occasion of sin, or if he should ask it for sinful ends, or in case a man ask that would be a monument of his shame, all which cases I have spoken to before, therefore shall not now say any more. 11th, God may hear another man's prayers for thee, though he will not hear thine own. This is a great comfort to every poor, weak Christian in the world. They have a stock of prayers going for them to the throne of grace. You read in Job chapter 42 that God forbade his 3 friends to pray, but bade Job pray for them, and told him that he would hear him for them. In verse 8 and 9, go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering, and my servant Job shall pray for you. For him will I accept, lest I deal with you after your folly, in that you have not spoken of me the thing that is right, like my servant Job. And they did as God commanded them, and the Lord accepted Job. It may be there be times when you cannot pray, or when God will not hear your prayers. But remember, you have a stock of prayers going for you. and thus much shall suffice by way of an answer to this objection. I come now to make application, the end of the 7th sermon. This is the 8th sermon on Luke chapter 11, verse 8. Though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he will rise and give him. In the first place, let me draw some inferences or corollaries from what hath been insisted upon. First, returns to prayer are not given for the work's sake, but for the person's sake. Though the matter of thy prayer be good, yet if thou art not a good man, thou shalt not be accepted. God had respect first to Abel, and then to his offering. Psalm 34:17, the righteous cry, and the Lord heareth. The person must be in a state of favor before the duty can be accepted. Second, though prayers are not returned for the work, yet they are not returned without the work. God expects the work, and the work you must do, though God will not have you to look for acceptance for the work's sake. Third, nor are returns of prayer made to a person, singly considered, but a member of Christ, as one that hath a share in his intercession. John 15, verse 7, if ye abide in me, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be given you. And so John 16:23, whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, that he will give to you. All our prayers are but ciphers, till Christ's intercession be added. Ciphers in arithmetic stand for nothing, till a figure be added. Fourth, the longer and the more thou hast prayed, the more affectionate shouldest thou be in prayer. Matthew 6, verse 7. Ask, and ye shall have. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Observe the gradation in these words. Ask, but you must not stay there. You must seek. Nor yet must you rest satisfied there. You must knock. Your affections should be every day more eager and earnest. You should pray more fervently, as it is said of Christ, Luke 22:44. Fifth, he can never pray importunately that doth not pray daily. Intermission of duty will quickly cause an interruption in thine affections. You must therefore pray in secret, pray fervently, pray morning and evening, and to stir you up to and encourage you in this work, consider first the example of those holy men of God who have done thus. Nehemiah 1, verse 6. Let thine ear now be attentive, and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee day and night. So you have the example of Daniel in Daniel 6, verse 10. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did before time. It was a custom that he had observed of former time. Though he was a great courtier and a man full of great employment, yet he would not neglect prayer. Nor was this an extraordinary fit, but his ordinary course. So in David, Psalm 5:3, my voice shalt thou hear in the morning, and in the evening will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. So Psalm 88:13, but unto thee have I cried, O Lord, and in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee. So Psalm 119:147, I prevented the dawning of the morning, and cried unto the Lord. Psalm 55:17, evening and morning, and at noon will I pray and cry aloud. Second, you have the example of Jesus Christ himself in Mark 1:35. In the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed, and so at evening. Matthew 14:23. He went unto a mountain to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there also. At least you should think this was only upon extraordinary occasions. It is said in Luke 22:3, he came to the Mount of Olives as he was wont. John 18:2, Jesus resorted thither with his disciples. Third, consider you have the very examples of heathens in this. The heathens sacrificed to Hercules morning and evening upon the great altar at Rome. Fourth, Consider that in the Lord's Prayer we are taught to pray every day. Christ did not bid us pray for bread or things necessary for a month or a year, but day by day. Fifth, this was prefigured in the law. There was a daily offering to be given to God, a lamb at morning and a lamb at night, as you may see in Exodus 29:38 and 39. Yea, extraordinary sacrifices did not abolish this number. There was a burnt offering for the Sabbath, besides the continual burnt offering, and the burnt offering at the beginning of the month, and the Passover. And yet, though these extraordinary works were to be done, yet the ordinary were not to be left undone. So that you see, here is good ground and encouragement for men to be frequent in these religious duties, and so much for the first use. Second, this may be useful for the instruction of those to whom God hath given returns of prayer, to whom God hath out of his bounty given more than they did ask. To such I must give, first, some negative cautions, and secondly, some positive cautions. First, some negative cautions, and that in 4 regards. First, let not God's returns to thy prayers make thee remiss and careless in the performance of duty. Beware of an empty heart when God brings in thy mercies with a full hand. Merchant adventurers, if they have good returns, are encouraged to adventure their ships to sea again. Our hearts are so base and disingenuous that we are apt, when we have what we seek for, to seek no more. Oh, take heed of this. Let not God's goodness make you worse. Another caution is this. Let not returns to prayer make you conceited and proud of your gifts or of your graces. We are too apt to reflect upon ourselves, our parts, our graces, our abilities, and therefore we have more need to take heed of it. Beware that thine heart be not lifted up in pride against God, lest God be provoked to lift up his hand against thee in judgment. Third, take heed that you do not ascribe the returns of prayer to your own importunity, but merely to the freeness of God's grace. Men are very apt to sacrifice to their own nets and burn incense to their own drags. Take heed of this. God cannot endure to have his glory given to another. Say rather, I have received a mercy, but alas, there is nothing in me that could deserve it. All comes solely from the free grace of God. Fourth, take heed of returning again to sin after God hath returned thy prayers into thy bosom. Psalm 85:8, I will hear what the Lord God will speak, for he will speak peace to his people, but let them not turn again to folly. It would be both sin and folly in thee to return to sin after God hath given thee an answer of peace. This was David's resolution for his own particular. Psalm 6:8, Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity. Why? What is the reason? The Lord hath heard the voice of my supplication. As if David had said, O ye wicked men, you have been occasions of sin to me, and companions in sin with me. But now that God hath been thus gracious to me, now that God hath graciously returned my prayers, I will have no more to do with you. Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. And so much for the negative cautions. I shall now lay down a few positive cautions. First, if God hath returned thy prayers, see that thou beest more frequent in prayer than thou wast formerly. This was the purpose of holy David, Psalm 116. Because the Lord hath heard my prayer, therefore I will call upon him as long as I live. So let it be your care, to set yourself more solemnly and seriously to seek God than you ever have done. And second, see that you be more in praises to God than you have been. Those mercies that thou hast won by prayer are to be worn by thankfulness. Psalm 145:10, All thy works praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints do bless thee. All God's works do praise him. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. That is, they are all the passive monuments of God's power in creating them. But the saints, they are agents in praising God. Blessing is more than praising. A picture praiseth him that made it, but it doth not bless him. The saints, they bless God in a peculiar manner. Their mouths are full of the praises of God. They have a principle within them of praising God. They are agents in setting forth his praise and therefore it is very fit that you should bless God. Third, see that you be much in obedience. If God doth much for thee, see that thou do much for God. If God hath an hearing ear, thou must have a doing hand, and so much for the use of caution. Third, I shall speak something by way of comfort. First, to such as have not this importunity, nor this return of prayers, and second, to such as have returns to prayer. First, here is a word of consolation to those that want this holy importunity, and that in three respects. First, thou mayest pray with sincerity, when thou dost not pray with importunity. The Lord, saith David, is nigh unto all that call upon him. But how? Not only to them that call upon him importunately and powerfully, but to all that call upon him in truth. If thou canst say thou dost call upon God in truth, and with a sincere heart, God will be nigh unto thee. Second, it is the office of Christ to pray for thee in heaven, when thou dost not pray upon earth. It is the work of Jesus Christ to make intercession for thee to his Father. Although thou hast not importunity in thyself, yet consider, O believing soul, that Christ is in heaven, importuning the Father for thee. Third, a sense and complaining of the want of this holy importunity is accounted by God a degree of it. If you did never complain of the want of the Spirit, it was a sign you never had the Spirit, and now that you bewail the want of it, it is a sign you have it. Second, here is also a word of consolation to those that have returns of prayer, and that in four respects. First, thy mercies are double mercies. It is a mercy to have mercy, but to have it in such a way is a double mercy. Psalm 91, they shall call upon me, and I will answer them, and I will be with him in trouble. It is a mercy to have deliverance out of trouble, but to have it through prayer, a deliverance that comes in by prayer, is a double mercy. Second, these mercies are sanctified mercies. Mercies as you are creatures are good, but as returns of prayer they are sanctified, and blessed mercies are much better to the soul that enjoyeth them. Third, the mercies which thou hast as returns of prayer are costly mercies. Mercies that come in by providence are easy and cheap, but mercies that come in by prayer are costly. They cost the price of Christ's blood to purchase them, and they cost thee many a prayer and tear to obtain them. Fourth, these mercies are sealing mercies, and that in three particulars. They are seals to you that you have the Spirit of God, for Christ hears no prayers and no spirit but his own. God is as well pleased with the barking of a dog as with the prayers of a Christless man. Second, it is a seal to thee of an interest in Christ's intercession. If thy prayers are returned, it is a sign they are accepted. Now, no prayers are accepted but by virtue of the intercession of Jesus Christ. Third, these returns are a seal of more mercies, a sign that thou shalt have more mercies from God. One mercy that is given in by prayer is a pledge of another mercy, and thy mercy in this life is a pledge to thee that thou shalt have eternal happiness in heaven to all eternity. The end.